The morning began like any other. The sun was hidden behind thick clouds, and the streets buzzed with the normal rhythm of life. People walked hurriedly to work, children laughed on their way to school, and the tall building at the corner of the avenue stood like it always had, firm, silent, almost eternal. But sometimes, eternity ends in seconds. It started with a sound, a sharp cracking noise that echoed through the empty hallways of the building. At first, no one paid attention. Old buildings make noises all the time. But then, plaster fell from the ceiling. A thin line appeared along the wall, like a scar being carved into the very skin of the structure. The scar spread, stretching across floors, splitting tiles, shattering glass. Inside the apartments, panic rose like smoke. Families rushed down the stairs, clutching bags, photos, and whatever they could carry. The elevator, once a convenience, became a death trap no one dared to use. The ground trembled as if the earth itself was whispering a warning, "Leave now." Yet in the midst of chaos, one resident couldn't escape. An elderly woman, frail and alone, had taken the elevator just as the building's frame began to shift. With a violent jolt, the power flickered, and the elevator froze between floors. Darkness swallowed her, broken only by the dim red glow of the emergency light. She screamed for help, but her voice was drowned by the thunder of falling debris and the footsteps of dozens fleeing. Outside, bystanders gathered, their eyes locked on the building as chunks of concrete rained down. Sirens wailed in the distance, but help was far away. The air filled with dust and dread. People whispered the same terrible thought. The building was going to collapse. But in that very moment, another sound broke through, the pounding of paws against the pavement. A golden figure emerged from the smoke. His fur gleamed under the gray sky, and his cape fluttered behind him like a banner of hope. On his chest, not the S of Superman, but a bold R, shining with meaning. It was SuperRetriver. He didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate risks or wait for orders. His instincts were sharper than any siren. The golden retriever's ears twitched, catching the faintest echo of the woman's cries from within the crumbling tower. His heart raced, but his paws were steady. He knew where he was needed. As the crowd gasped, SuperRetriver ran straight into the danger everyone else was fleeing. The entrance groaned, metal bent, and shards of glass clung dangerously overhead. Yet nothing stopped him. To the people outside, it was madness. To him, it was destiny. Because sometimes true heroes don't wear capes, unless they're a retriever who does. And with every step inside the fractured building, the impossible rescue was already beginning. Don't miss what happens next. Stay with us, and if you believe heroes can come in all forms, even four-legged ones, tap that like button and subscribe for more incredible rescues. The building was groaning like a wounded giant. Every second, new cracks spread across its walls, staircases shook under frantic footsteps, and clouds of dust made the air almost impossible to breathe. Residents were shouting, crying, colliding with each other as they fought for the exits. Children clung to their parents, neighbors carried the elderly down the trembling stairs, and the once calm lobby became a battlefield of fear. The emergency alarm began to blare, a shrill metallic sound that should have triggered immediate evacuation long before. But this alarm was too late, just like the security guards' broken shouts over the megaphone. People had already made up their minds, escape or be buried alive. And so they ran. Doors slammed open, and wave after wave of tenants spilled onto the street. Some carried pets, others dragged suitcases. A few just ran with nothing but the clothes on their backs. The ground outside filled with bodies trembling not from injury, but from sheer panic. All eyes remained fixed on the shaking structure that loomed over them, threatening to collapse at any second. Yet no one noticed the faint, desperate cries coming from inside. Trapped in the pitch-black elevator, the elderly woman pressed her palms against the cold steel doors until they bruised. She screamed until her throat was raw, but her voice dissolved into the chaos outside. Every time she banged on the walls, dust sprinkled down on her head, and the cables above her groaned, like they might snap. Her heart raced with terror. She thought of her children, long grown and living far away. She thought of the neighbors who had always offered a smile in the hallway but had now fled without realizing she was missing. Her loneliness grew heavier than the concrete ceiling, above. For her, the alarm had come too late. Not just the siren that wailed outside, but the alarm of time itself. She believed her final moments had already begun. Meanwhile, SuperRetriver was already inside. His golden fur was streaked with dust, his paws leaving prints on the trembling floor. The further he advanced, the darker it became. Furniture lay, overturned, debris scattered everywhere, and the air vibrated with the sound of concrete shifting under its own weight. But his ears caught what no human outside could hear, the faint heartbeat of a woman trapped in terror. He paused at the foot of the stairwell. Dust rained down like ash, and a steel beam slammed to the ground with a deafening crash. Any normal animal would have turned back. Any normal human would have run. But SuperRetriver pressed forward, guided not by sight but by the unshakable instinct to protect. Outside, the crowd thought everyone had escaped. Firefighters still had not arrived. The police kept people back, shouting that the structure was unsafe. No one imagined that a life still hung in the balance within the steel coffin of the elevator. But heroes don't ignore alarms. Heroes hear the cries others cannot. And SuperRetriver was already climbing through the wreckage, determined to find the voice that the world had ignored. Outside the collapsing building, chaos was absolute. Sirens finally approached in the distance, but no one believed they would arrive in time. Neighbors wept, pointing to the growing cracks that split the facade from top to bottom. Dust clouds escaped through broken windows like smoke from a volcano. Every second felt like the last. Then, through the haze, a figure emerged. Not a firefighter, not a police officer, but something far more unexpected. His golden coat shone beneath the gray sky, reflecting what little light pierced through the clouds. Draped across his back, a blue cape fluttered with defiance against the storm of dust. On his chest, a bold red R replaced the famous S of Superman, not for steel, but for something far more loyal, Retriever. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Children pointed, eyes wide with wonder. Adults, trembling with fear, felt a spark of hope ignite in their chests. The name spread among them like a prayer, whispered first, then shouted louder and louder, "SuperRetriver!" He didn't stop to acknowledge the cheers. His gaze fixed on the building, ears twitching as they locked on to the faint echo of a human cry. The cry no one else had heard. His paws pressed against the cracked pavement, muscles tense, as if the weight of destiny rested on his shoulders. And then, without hesitation, he leapt forward. The world seemed to hold its breath as the golden hero sprinted straight into the collapsing tower. Glass shattered above him, metal twisted under his paws, but he did not falter. His cape snapped like a banner of defiance, announcing to the storm of destruction, "I am not afraid." Inside, the scene was apocalyptic. Darkness swallowed the halls. The air was thick with dust, choking and blinding. Wooden doors trembled on their hinges, pipes burst and sprayed water across cracked tiles, and every wall seemed ready to give way. But through it all, SuperRetriver advanced with unwavering courage. He stopped suddenly, nose lifted, listening. The faint sound of sobbing cut through the chaos. The elderly woman, trapped and alone. A sharp bark escaped his throat, echoing through the corridor like a signal of hope. Inside the elevator, the woman froze. Her eyes widened, heart pounding, as she pressed her ear to the door. Could it be real? In the middle of her nightmare, was there truly a savior coming? She whispered a trembling prayer, "Please don't leave me." SuperRetriver barked again, louder this time. His tail flicked once, not in play but in determination. He had found her. Back outside, the crowd strained their eyes, hoping to catch a glimpse of the golden hero inside, but the dust was too thick, the cracks too wide. Many feared they would never see him again, swallowed by the very danger he dared to confront. Yet deep down, something told them this was not the end. Because heroes are not defined by safety. They are defined by sacrifice. And SuperRetriver was prepared to give everything for the life still trapped inside. At that moment, he wasn't just a dog. He wasn't just a symbol. He was courage given form, hope given fur, faith given breath. And as his paws pressed against the trembling floor, SuperRetriver prepared to face the true battle, freeing the last soul in a building that had already been abandoned by everyone else. The moment SuperRetriver crossed the threshold, the world outside seemed to vanish. The screams, the sirens, the crowd, all faded into a muffled hum. What remained was chaos in its purest form. The building groaned and shuddered with every passing second, as though it were alive and dying at the same time. The lobby, once polished with marble floors and glowing lights, was now unrecognizable. Tiles lay shattered like broken mirrors, and chandeliers swung violently before snapping from their chains. Sparks rained from severed wires, sizzling as they touched puddles of water spreading from burst pipes. The smell of concrete dust, scorched. Metal and fear mixed into a suffocating cloud. But through the darkness, one figure moved with certainty. His golden fur, though dulled with dust, still glowed against the shadows. His cape, blue with the proud red R, snapped in the wind created by falling debris. Each paw landed with purpose, steady even as the ground trembled beneath him. SuperRetriver's ears swiveled like radars. He picked up every sound, the crack of steel bending under pressure, the drip of water echoing down corridors, and faint but persistent, the trembling cries of the trapped woman. Every step brought him closer, every second heavier with danger. The stairwell ahead had already begun to crumble. Chunks of concrete blocked the path and dust filled the air like smoke from a fire. With a powerful leap, SuperRetriver bounded over the wreckage, his cape brushing against broken railings. A piece of ceiling collapsed behind him with a deafening crash, sealing off the way back. Retreat was no longer an option, only forward. On the second floor, the scene grew worse. Doors hung half open, revealing apartments torn apart as if by an unseen hand. Plates and picture frames littered the ground. Toys lay abandoned, their bright colors dulled by dust. The building wasn't just falling apart, it was erasing lives in real time. Still, SuperRetriver pressed on. His breathing was steady, his gaze fixed. He barked once, sharp and commanding, as if to remind the collapsing tower, "I will not stop." Finally, he reached the corridor where the sound was clearest. The elevator shaft loomed ahead, its doors rattling against the frame, as the cables groaned under unbearable strain. From inside came the faint, panicked voice of the woman. "Help me! Please! Someone!" SuperRetriver approached the steel doors, pressing his nose against the gap. The scent of fear, sweat, and desperation filled his senses. He barked again, softer this time, a signal of reassurance. Inside the elevator, the woman gasped. For the first time since being trapped, she didn't feel alone. The walls around them shivered violently, a reminder that time was almost gone. Beams creaked overhead, and dust cascaded down like sand in an hourglass. But SuperRetriver didn't back away. He planted his paws firmly on the ground, ready to do the impossible. Because in that moment, nothing else existed. Not the crowd outside, not the danger above. Only the woman who still had hope left to cling to, and the golden hero who refused to let her die in the dark. The battle against the collapsing building was about to begin. Inside the elevator, Darkness pressed in from every side. The only light came from a flickering red bulb above the panel, casting long, trembling shadows across the steel walls. The air was thick with dust and fear, each breath shallow, each second endless. The woman inside, gray-haired, frail, her hands trembling, clutched the railing as if it could somehow save her. She had been there for what felt like hours, though in truth it had been only minutes. Minutes stretched into eternity when death could arrive at any second. Her cries had gone unanswered until now. Her fists pounded the doors, her voice cracked with desperation. "Help me! Somebody, please!" Her mind filled with images of her family far away, of birthdays missed, of moments left unsaid. She wasn't ready to vanish into the rubble. Then it came. A sound unlike the groaning metal or the cracking walls. A bark, sharp, strong, alive. Her heart skipped. She pressed her ear to the gap between the elevator doors. Another bark followed, closer this time, filled with determination. She gasped, her tears mixing with dust streaking down her cheeks. "No, it can't be," she whispered, but it was. On the other side of those steel doors stood not a rescuer in uniform, not a firefighter or a police officer, but a hero with 4 legs and a cape. SuperRetriver. He pressed his golden muzzle into the narrow gap, snorting out the dust, letting her know she wasn't alone. His paws scratched at the door, not in panic but in defiance, as if telling the elevator itself, "You won't take her." The woman fell to her knees, her palms flat against the cold steel. "Please, don't leave me," she whispered, her voice breaking. She knew it was a dog, but not just any dog. His presence carried the weight of safety, of strength, of miracles. SuperRetriver barked again, steady and sure. Outside, the IKEA building shifted violently, a reminder that time was running out. The cables groaned above, threatening to snap. The metal groaned with strain. But in that terrifying moment, a bond formed. The woman's fear met the retriever's courage, and hope sparked where none should have existed. He paced back a step, then lunged forward, claws scraping against the floor as he pressed his weight into the crack. Muscles rippled beneath his dusty golden fur, his cape whipping around him like the banner of a soldier marching into war. The doors rattled but did not give, yet he did not retreat. He barked again, this time louder, commanding, as though calling the universe itself to open the way. The woman, trembling, placed her forehead against the steel. She didn't know how this miracle had found her, but for the first time since the elevator froze, she believed she would survive. Outside, debris continued to fall. Concrete cracked above them, beams bent dangerously, and the building howled like a dying beast. But between the woman's fear and the collapsing tower, one guardian stood, SuperRetriver, refusing to surrender. Because to him, she wasn't just another resident, she was the last soul inside, and he would not leave her behind. The building screamed. That was the only way to describe it. A low, tortured groan that rose through its frame, echoing like the final breath of a dying colossus. Every second, the walls buckled more, the ceiling sagged lower, and the cables above the elevator strained with a sound that chilled the air. Inside, the elderly woman clutched her chest. The tiny red emergency light above flickered like the heartbeat of the elevator itself, and she knew it could stop at any moment. Her prayers turned frantic. Each tremor felt like the last, each falling speck of dust a countdown. On the other side of the steel doors, SuperRetriver refused to yield. His paws dug into the cracked tiles, muscles rippling beneath his golden coat. He braced, pressed, pulled. The elevator door shuddered but stayed stubbornly shut. He barked once, sharp and commanding, not at the woman, but at the building itself, as if daring it to collapse before he completed his mission. The crowd outside gasped as another section of the facade gave way, crashing into the street below. Sirens grew closer, but help was still seconds away, and seconds were exactly what they didn't have. The onlookers clung to each other, whispering, "There's no time left. It's going to fall." But inside, time had a different meaning. For SuperRetriver, every heartbeat was a choice to fight, to push harder, to do what no one else could. His instincts screamed urgency, his ears twitched at the creak of failing beams. He knew the window to act was closing. The woman inside sobbed. Her knees weakened, her palms slick with sweat against the cold steel. She whispered words no one else could hear. If you really can, save me." Her voice cracked, breaking under the weight of despair. And then something shifted. SuperRetriver, with a guttural growl that shook through his chest, pressed harder than before. His claws screeched against the tile, sparks flickered from falling wires, and with one final push, the elevator doors groaned wider by an inch, just enough for light to slip through, just enough for hope to expand. Her eyes widened at the sliver of golden fur she saw pushing through the gap. She reached out instinctively, her fingertips brushing against his muzzle. That single touch carried a lifetime of promises. "Don't give up. I'm still here. Please don't let go." But the building wasn't waiting. A thunderous crack tore through the air as a support beam collapsed nearby, shaking the floor so violently the elevator itself dropped a fraction of an inch. The cables shrieked like banshees. Dust rained in torrents, filling the air until breathing became nearly impossible. Time was no longer slipping away. It was gone. Yet in that suffocating moment, when the odds were absolute and death seemed unavoidable, one truth remained. SuperRetriver was not finished. He barked once more, the sound echoing like a war cry, a refusal to surrender. His golden eyes locked on the trapped woman. Even with the world collapsing around him, he promised her silently, "I will get you out." And as the walls tightened their deadly grip, the greatest act of courage was about to begin. The building was no longer just trembling, it was collapsing piece by piece. Each rumble shook dust loose in violent clouds. Every crack stretched wider across the ceiling, and the ground beneath SuperRetriver's paws felt like it might split at any second. The air was deafening with the chaos of destruction. The elevator groaned louder than ever. The cables screeched like tortured metal, straining under unbearable pressure. The elderly woman clung to the railing inside, sobbing, with her head pressed against the cold steel. She had almost accepted that this would be her tomb, until she felt it again. A presence. A force of will greater than fear. SuperRetriver stood tall before the elevator, chest rising and falling with determination. His cape fluttered through the storm of dust, the red R glowing like a symbol of defiance against doom itself. His golden eyes locked on the narrow crack between the doors. His instincts roared within him, now or never. He backed up a step, muscles coiled like springs. Then, with a growl deep in his chest, he lunged forward. His claws scraped sparks across the tiles as he pressed his weight into the steel. The doors groaned, bending, shifting just slightly more. The gap widened to a hand's width. Inside, the woman gasped as light streamed in. She reached out desperately, her hand trembling, her fingers brushing the warm fur of his muzzle. It wasn't just a touch. It was life itself, proof that she was not forgotten. But SuperRetriver knew it wasn't enough. He had to get her out. With a mighty bark that echoed through the crumbling hallways, he threw himself at the doors again, jaws clamping down on the edge of the frame. His teeth gritted against cold metal, his body straining with superhuman strength. The cords of muscle along his shoulders and back flexed as he pulled, twisted and pressed with everything he had. The building protested, as if fighting him. A massive crack split across the ceiling, and a section of plaster crashed just inches away. The floor shook violently, threatening to drop them both into the abyss of rubble. Yet the retriever refused to retreat. His paws bled against the rough ground, his chest heaved with effort, but his spirit remained unbroken. And then, the miracle. The elevator doors, stubborn and unyielding, gave way with a screech that tore through the air. They slid open just enough for the woman to crawl through. Her eyes widened in disbelief, tears streaming down her face as she whispered the name the crowd outside had already given him. SuperRetriver. She dropped into his embrace, clutching his golden fur as if it were the only anchor in a collapsing world. He stood firm, lowering himself to steady her trembling body. His bark softened now, a reassuring tone that told her, "You're safe. I've got you." But the battle wasn't over. The walls quaked, and a thunderous roar above signaled the building's final moments. They had broken the impossible barrier, but escaping through chaos would be a test even greater. Because saving her from the elevator was only the beginning. The real miracle would be getting her out alive before everything fell. The elevator. Doors finally surrendered, but the true battle had only begun. The building groaned like a dying beast, its final collapse moments away. Dust swirled so thick it blinded the eyes, and the roar of falling concrete shook the air like thunder. SuperRetriver guided the elderly woman out, his body pressed against her trembling legs, his barks sharp and urgent. "Move! Don't stop!" Her frail steps stumbled across the cracked tiles, but she clung to his presence as if he were a lifeline woven by heaven itself. The corridor stretched ahead like a gauntlet of death. Ceiling tiles crashed down, pipes burst and sprayed water in violent arcs, and chunks of concrete rained like meteors. The woman coughed, her breath shallow under the suffocating dust. But every time her knees threatened to give, SuperRetriver pressed his shoulder against her, steadying her, pulling her forward. A section of the floor collapsed just meters ahead, leaving a jagged hole into the black void below. The woman froze, terror paralyzing her. But the golden hero leapt across with ease, his cape whipping behind him. He landed on the other side and turned, barking urgently. His eyes glowed with a promise. "You can do this. I'll catch you." Her hands trembled as she braced herself. With a gasp of fear, she stumbled forward and leapt. Her feet slipped on the broken edge, but SuperRetriver lunged, clamping his jaws gently onto the sleeve of her coat, pulling her to safety. She collapsed into sobs, but his bark silenced despair. There was no time to cry. They had to keep moving. The stairwell loomed ahead, but it was chaos incarnate. Rails bent like twisted metal skeletons, steps crumbled under weight, and fire from a broken wire lit patches of darkness with flickering orange. The building shuddered violently, the final warning. SuperRetriver descended first, his paws light yet steady on the unstable steps. He barked, guiding her step by step. She gripped the railing with one hand, his fur with the other, trusting him more than she trusted the ground beneath her. Each step felt like walking across glass, ready to shatter. On the second landing, a massive beam crashed down, blocking their path completely. The woman gasped, despair flooding her once more. "We're trapped!" she cried, but SuperRetriver didn't believe in trapped. With a growl of determination, he shoved his body against the gap between the beam and the wall. His muscles strained, dust coated his golden fur, but he pushed inch by inch until a narrow space opened, just enough for her to crawl through. "Go," his eyes seemed to say, and she did, squeezing through the impossible space, guided by the miracle standing beside her. Finally, the lobby came into sight, what remained of it. Glass windows shattered in cascades, doors swung off hinges, and the roar of the collapsing tower grew deafening. Outside, the crowd screamed as the first major section of the upper floors crumbled, sending debris crashing into the street. But through the storm, a golden flash appeared. SuperRetriver, cape whipping, emerged from the cloud of dust with the woman leaning against him. Step by step, stumble by stumble, he led her across the fractured lobby floor. Each second felt stolen from death itself. And just as they reached the threshold, the final roar erupted behind them. The building collapsed inward with the fury of 1,000 storms, a mountain of steel and concrete crashing down. The crowd gasped, covering their faces from the explosion of dust and debris. But when the cloud cleared, a miracle stood at the edge of ruin. SuperRetriver, golden fur shining beneath layers of dust, cape still fluttering, guiding the trembling woman into the arms of safety. The impossible had been done. The world slowed to a heartbeat. The elderly woman, coughing and trembling, leaned against SuperRetriver as they stumbled across the fractured lobby floor. Each step felt like defiance against destiny itself. The golden hero's body pressed close to hers, steadying her with every stride, his sharp barks guiding her through the storm of dust and ruin. Behind them, the tower screamed in agony. Steel twisted like bones, snapping under immense pressure. Windows shattered into storms of glass, and fire burst from ruptured wires in sparks of red and white. The once proud building was no longer a home. It was a collapsing tomb, dragging itself into oblivion. The crowd outside had fallen into complete silence. Hundreds of eyes locked on the entrance, watching the golden figure lead the last soul trapped inside. Children clutched their parents. Strangers held hands. All of them shared the same desperate thought. Make it. Please. Just make it. Then it happened. A deafening crack split the air like thunder. The building shuddered, sinking into itself as if the ground below had given way. Entire sections of the upper floors crumbled, raining debris like meteors onto the street. People screamed, scattering backward. The collapse had begun. Inside, the ceiling split open above SuperRetriver and the woman. Chunks of concrete slammed down, shattering tiles around them. A beam crashed so close it clipped his cape, pinning it for a moment beneath its weight. The woman gasped in terror. "No!" But the golden hero didn't falter. With a fierce tug, he ripped free, leaving a torn piece of fabric beneath the rubble and barked sharply. "Keep moving!" The exit stood just ahead, but it looked impossibly far. The entire lobby trembled, every second threatening to bury them alive. The woman's legs weakened, her breath ragged. Her body screamed to stop, to give up. But every time she faltered, she felt the push of warm fur at her side and the unwavering fire in SuperRetriver's eyes. He wasn't giving up, so neither could she. Together they stumbled forward, dust blinding their eyes, the roar of destruction filling their ears. Just as they reached the doors, the ground heaved one final time. The building gave its last scream, a howl of collapsing steel and shattering stone. With a heroic leap, SuperRetriver pushed the woman across the threshold. They tumbled into the street as the tower behind them imploded, collapsing into a monstrous cloud of dust and debris. Silence followed. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. No one moved, no one spoke. The building that had loomed for decades was gone, reduced to rubble in seconds. And then, from the dust, a golden figure emerged. SuperRetriver stood tall, chest rising and falling, cape torn but still fluttering. His golden fur was coated in ash, his paws bloodied, yet his eyes burned with victory. At his side, the elderly woman clung to him, tears streaming down her face. She was alive. Against every odd, she was alive. The crowd erupted. Cheers, sobs, applause. The street shook not with fear anymore, but with awe. Phones rose into the air, capturing the miracle, broadcasting it to the world. People shouted his name in unison. SuperRetriver! SuperRetriever! In E. Those final seconds before collapse, when hope should have died, courage had triumphed, and the legend of the golden hero was sealed forever. When the dust finally cleared, the world saw not just rubble, but a miracle standing at its edge. The elderly woman, trembling but alive, clung to the golden hero who had refused to let her perish. And there he stood, SuperRetriver, cape torn, paws bruised, but eyes burning with an unshakable fire. The crowd, once frozen in fear, erupted into cheers that echoed down the avenue. Strangers hugged each other. Children pointed with awe. Phones captured every angle, yet no camera could truly contain the weight of that moment. Humanity had just witnessed the impossible, not from a machine, not from a superhero in a comic book, but from a golden retriever who had chosen courage over safety. It wasn't only a rescue, it was a lesson. Because in life, we all face collapsing buildings of our own, moments when everything around us seems to be falling apart. We feel trapped in the dark, like the woman in the elevator, believing no one hears our cries. But then, sometimes, hope arrives in the most unexpected form. It may not look like what we imagined. It may not come when we planned. But it comes. SuperRetrievers. Story reminds us that real heroism isn't about strength alone. It's about refusing to give up when someone needs us most. It's about pushing against impossible odds, even when the walls are crumbling. And it's about being that light, that paw, that hand reaching into the darkness to pull someone back into life. So let me ask you, who has been your SuperRetriever? Who stepped into your collapsing world and refused to let you fall? Or maybe, just maybe, you have been that hero for someone else. Share your story in the comments because someone out there might need to read it today. And if this story touched you, remember, this is only the beginning. Hit the like button to honor the courage you've just witnessed. Subscribe so you don't miss the next incredible rescue, because every story we tell carries not just suspense, but a reminder that miracles still exist, often where we least expect them. Because today, it was a collapsing building. Tomorrow, who knows what challenge awaits? But one thing is certain, SuperRetriver will be there.